Go ahead and call this meeting to order. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone will join me in the pledge. Face flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next we'll have roll call.
Chairman Peters? Can you repeat yourself? I think the sound cut out. Chairman Peters?
Oh, I'm sorry, here?
Vice Chair Heyman?
Present.
Director St. Amand?
Present.
Director Vallejo?
Present.
Director Itmeyer?
Present.
We'll move on to item number 2, adoption of the agenda and AB 361 finding. Keith, would you like to comment on this?
Keith, I believe you're muted still.
Whoops. It happens at least once a meeting. Okay, sorry about that. I was saying that I had a late breaking piece of information that came in this morning that necessitates a brief closed session with the board regarding the litigations, all of them. And I'd like to add that as a need arose subsequent to posting the agenda item. Because it's closed session, I can't really tell you many details in public, except to say that it is, I do need to get some feedback from the board on something this morning. Also, I would say that this is, since this involves the litigation, by agreement, this would implicate the conflict with the water district. So it would only be the 4 non-water district board members attending the closed session. I talked to April and she's set up a separate WebEx meeting so that we can actually meet in closed session at the end of the public agenda. So again, I need a 4/5 vote. You need to make a finding that the need to discuss this matter arose after posting the agenda, which is pretty incredible given that this was only a 24-hour agenda, but trust me that it did, and that we need to take action before our next regular meeting, which we do. So,
Keith, which litigation matter or matters is this related to?
It actually applies to all of them, all of the consolidated or the coordinated, all of the coordinated matters it applies to.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Chairman Peters? Chairman Peters, you might be muted.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything after Keith started talking. Is this just the vote?
Yeah, did you hear me talk? Or
Yes, I heard Keith. I didn't hear anything after that, but...
Oh, I think it was just at that point, Director Vallejo moved to adopt the agenda.
Oh, okay. Sorry, thank you. I'll vote aye.
Vice Chair Heyman?
Aye.
Director St. Amand?
I'm going to abstain. I don't understand why Mr. Lemieux thinks there's a conflict. As far as I'm aware, the Water District is not suing the Groundwater Authority.
Director Vallejo?
Aye.
Director Itmeyer?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Can I comment on?
Keith?
Yeah.
Keith? This is Jim Worth. David briefly stated the district does not participate in discussions with the GA related to any of the litigation matters. We haven't done so for almost 2 years. So you just so in the future, if you're okay to vote in favor of adding the agenda item, the conflict is known and recognized.
Okay, so thank you for that, Mr. Worth. I think that that is the custom, but I still do not agree that there is a conflict of interest. And I think that having that go unchallenged is unhealthy. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 3, public comment. Hold just a second here.
Keith wants to brief on that. It has to be a separate vote.
That's kind of, I thought too, so, okay. So we're going to move back to item number 2, adoption of the agenda and AB 361 finding. Keith, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, this is just a continuation of the AB 361 finding of a public emergency related to COVID that allows us to do the meetings partially electronically, as I say every time I bring it up. Except for today's meeting, for the most part, we actually comply with the regular Brown Act requirements because a quorum of our board is usually in attendance personally, but we also do this for the convenience of the TAC and the PAC so that they can meet telephonically.
Thank you. So we'll
I'll move.
second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director St. Amand,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Itnire.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 3, public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on the phones? Seeing none on the phones, we will now move on to item number 4, board member comments. Do we have any board member comments?
I have a quick statement. It's necessary for me to inform the board that I am an employee of the federal government. However, that being said, what I say today and my opinions do not necessarily reflect those of my employer. They were my opinions and mine alone. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, hearing no further comments from the board, we'll move on to item number 5. Authorize award of contract for the imported water pipeline alignment study.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I will introduce this item. As you all know, the Groundwater Authority was awarded a $7.6 million grant from the state earlier this year. In fact, we're working on finalizing that grant agreement and should have that executed very soon. In the meantime, the board authorized us to go ahead and issue a request for proposals for the imported water pipeline alignment study because, of course, the $7.6 million will be used to fund the preliminary work for our connection, our imported water connection. So ultimately, we received 2 bids from our RFP, and we met to review the bids, and Provost and Pritchard has the most qualified competitive bid at $449,100. Provost and Pritchard provided actually an excellent proposal with very experienced team members and also team members very knowledgeable about AVEC, who we'll be working with to ultimately make this connection. So there's additional information in the packet, but our recommendation is for the board to authorize entering into an agreement with Provost and Pritchard Consulting Group for preparation of the imported water pipeline alignment study.
Thank you, Carol.
Mr. Chairman, this is Steve. I want to add one small thing real quick is that, as Carol mentioned, we are in the final stages of executing our agreement with the state, and we obviously will not incur any cost until that agreement is executed.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Do we have any comments from the board?
None for me.
Okay, hearing no comments. Any comments from the, any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, we'll move to the phones. Do we have any? Okay. Caller, go ahead. Caller, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me? This is Renee West-Lusk. I just have one question. We are under time constraints, correct? That we have to spend the $7.6 million money on the study. Isn't there a deadline? So the sooner we approve a contract to get it done, the better.
Carol, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. Yes, that is correct. There is a three-year period for us to complete the work. So you're absolutely right, Renee. The sooner we can get started on it, the better. And literally, we will just be waiting for that signed agreement. Once this contract is approved with the consultant and we have the contract or the funding agreement in place with the state, we'll be able to move forward on this. We do have a timeline, a pretty brief timeline set forth in our instructions for this job. So you're right. This does need to be done quickly, and time is definitely of the essence.
Okay. Thank you. I approve the board going ahead with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renee.
And Renee, this is Steve again, and that's why we started preparing this RFP before we even had the agreement in place. We're allowed to charge the cost of this to the grant retroactively going back, but that's why we got started on this before we even had an agreement, because of the time requirements.
Thanks, Steve. Do we have any further public comment on the phones? Okay, seeing none. Any other comments from the board?
So the contract is for $500,000?
Yes.
So the follow-on work is already being organized? What, the planning phase for the follow-on work to this particular contract that would cover the other $7 million, that's already underway, yes?
Steve, I'll let you address that.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We are working on the RFP for CEQA compliance for the pipeline alignment. And we wanted to run concurrently with the pipeline study, but just behind the pipeline study, because we obviously can't do environmental compliance till we know where we're going. But yes, that's the next step. And then we'll move into design work. So yes, we've got a lot of work to do in the next 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Move approval of the item.
I'll second.
There we go. Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director St. Amand,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, we'll next move on to item number 6, authorize release of requests for bids for monitoring wells drilling services. Who would like to take the
Good
lead?
morning.
I think it's Gene.
Yes, good morning. This request for bid is to drill monitoring wells for measuring subflow from Rose Valley into Indian Wells Valley. This request for bid would go out for drilling services. The actual work was approved for Navy Coastal Royalty funding last year. This provides us with a firm bid. Our original cost estimate was for $140,000 for this work. We need the actual cost to complete the funding agreement. We recommend that the board authorize the release of this request for bids for monitoring well drilling services.
Do we have any comments from the board?
So the monitoring wells will help us pin down more precisely the amount of recharge coming through the Little Lake Gap.
Is it the Little Lake Gap or further east of that?
it is the Little Lake Gap. It's
Right.
just south of Little Lake that we have. This last year, we've been working with BLM for permitting of 2 well sites for monitoring wells.
Okay. Very good, thank you.
Okay, hearing no further comments from the board, do we have any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on the phones? No public comment on the phone, so we'll bring it back to the board. If there's no further comments, we'll bring it for a motion.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director St. Amand,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Itnire.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Excuse me.
Okay, moving on to item number 7, authorize water resource manager to prepare water recycling feasibility study for United States Bureau of Reclamation funding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Steve. I think Jeff and probably Todd or Jeff Simonetti with Capital Corps will do this, but I think Jeff will lead.
I believe Jeff Simonetti is going to lead us off on this.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
I don't see Jeff on the call.
Is Jeff on and not muted? Todd, I saw you were on.
Yes, I'm on. Let me reach out to Jeff. He's the one who put together the presentation. He was on.
Yeah, he was on. I saw him earlier.
Okay, he may have not turned
Jeff
on.
on the left-hand side. Third one down. That's
I'm
somebody
going to
else?
mute, Chairman. I'm going to mute.
Oh, great. Multiple Davids, multiple Jeffs. Nice. Okay.
There he is. You're up, Jeff.
Good morning. My apologies. I got kicked out of the WebEx there. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
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 Perfect. Sorry about that. All right. So good morning, everyone. So we'll just walk through the 2 slides that we had put together there for the presentation regarding the water recycling plant. So as you know, the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority is looking for funding for the proposed water recycling plant. And that is necessary to provide advanced treatment to the water supplies coming from the treatment plant. And then that will allow us to treat this water to the standards that the State Water Resources Control Board requires to inject the water back into the aquifer for recharge. Over the last year or so, we've been looking for potential funding sources for this program, and particularly for the initial planning resources required for that. In the Water Resources Development Act, and as well as the WIN Act that have been updated this year, there are particular programs that allow for, through the Bureau of Reclamation's Title 16 grant program, that will allow us to make an application for funding for this project. And the total estimated planning cost for these activities to be able to plan the water recycling plant is approximately $5.3 million. We've had initial, if we can go to the second slide, we've had an initial feasibility review with the Bureau of Reclamation, and they have agreed that we are within what they call the sort of the realm of the possible in terms of making an application. Now, Title 16 has a full $1 billion appropriation, which was passed through Congress in 2021 and has a 5-year time horizon. And through our initial determination, the program has said that we would be eligible to potentially make an application through the Reclaim and Reuse program, as well as the Drought Response program. So there are 2 steps that we need to take to be able to make an application for this. First, we need to do complete a feasibility study, and that is the subject of the approvals that we're looking for this morning. And that feasibility study will go through and do a very high-level overview of the project to make sure that we are fitting in completely with the guidelines of these particular programs for the Reclaim and Reuse program as well as the Drought Response program. The Bureau of Reclamation needs to review that, and if they give the approval for our eligibility determination, at that point we'll be able to make an application for our feasibility study is approved. Now, in terms of the timeline on this, it's usually we'll have to get the feasibility study approved and submitted by the end of the year, and the application notice for the funding sources are usually released in mid-March. So it'll be mid-March of next year for that fiscal year. And again, this will be for approximately, if we are eligible for this, application for the $5.3 million in planning grants that we'll need for the water recycling plant. And with that, I would be happy to hand it back over to Stetson or answer any questions that the board may have.
Hi, this is Jeff Helsley with Stetson. We have a couple of slides or comments here on the feasibility study itself. The feasibility study would need to include a project description and a description of the study area. It needs a statement of the problem that we're addressing and the need for the project. We have to discuss the water recycling opportunities that exist in the area, describe alternatives for the use of the recycled water or alternatives to solve the problem that we're addressing, and do an economic analysis of the project, provide justification for the recycling project, do a preliminary look at environmental considerations in effect, and with a NEPA federal approach on that. We need to address identify any legal and institutional requirements. And then the Title 16 program has a lot of research ties to it. So we need to identify any research needs that the Bureau of Reclamation might address at a later time. Now, the board had previously approved a budget of $180,000 for the recycled water program as part of the year 2022 annual budget. Under that budget, the board had authorized us to prepare a recycled water use alternatives analysis, which is still ongoing. Is wrapping up here in the next few months. That effort looked at the different alternatives for use of the recycled water from the city's wastewater plant. And our determination of the study has been that a deep injection project that used advanced treatment is the best alternative for the circumstances we have. We believe that we can wrap up that alternatives analysis. There'll be a final technical memo on that later in the year. Wrap that analysis up and conduct this feasibility study within that $180,000 budget. The feasibility study we're estimating would probably cost roughly $120,000 to $140,000 to prepare. The feasibility study needs to be done by the end of the year in order for the Bureau to review it and determine whether the project is eligible to allow us to get in line for federal funding in fiscal year 2023, which is one of the reasons we wanted to bring it to the board at this special meeting, is so if the board agrees, we can get started on that. If the board does authorize us to proceed, we will be using trestle technologies to assist us with some of the advanced treatment details, some of the identifying the research needs, and helping with some of the cost estimates on the advanced treatment that are needed for the feasibility study. Trestle Technologies is very well known in recycled water advanced treatment projects. We've teamed with them before. We together have prepared a Title 16 feasibility study before for a recycled water project. Staff recommends that the board authorize the water resource manager to proceed with the Title 16 feasibility study for the water recycling plant.
Thank you, Jeff. So we'll bring it back to the board for any comments.
Just a quick question for my own information. The feasibility study has to be completed by the end of this year. I assume that's the calendar year?
That's correct, calendar year.
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment. I know that in dealing with the funding in the past on the federal side, being ahead of the ball and ready for and able to apply for the funding is really important. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this. Any other comments from the board?
I do have one quick comment.
Yes.
The use of recycled groundwater is critical to meeting the water needs of the valley. And any funding we can get from outside of the valley is invaluable. And if that moves the ball down the field, it gets us to the recycled water, then I'm in support of that.
Very good. Okay, hearing no further comment from the board, I'll bring it to the public for public comment. Any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, any public comment from the phones? Seeing no public comment on the phones, we'll bring it back to the board for motion. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to backtrack. We do have a call. Caller, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, this is Renee West. I just want to know the money for the feasibility study has already been put into the budget for this year's Groundwater Authority budget, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Okay, any further public comment on the phones? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Also move.
Second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director St. Amand,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Itnire.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to, hang on just a second. I think that concludes our items for this meeting. So item number 8 is the date of our next meeting.
Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes.
We remember we have the added item for closed session.
Okay, so at this point, we will go ahead and end our open session, and we will move into closed session.
Okay, see you on the other side.
Thank you, everybody. So we are out of closed session. We're moving back into open session, and we'll have a report out by Keith Lemieux.
Certainly, Mr. Vice Chair. The board met in closed session to discuss all of the litigation items, all of our pending litigation items, including the adjudication that was added as based on the fact that need arose subsequent to posting of the agenda. There is no reportable action on any of those cases. Mr. Vice Chair, that concludes the report.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we'll move on to item number 8, date of our next meeting. It will be August 10th, 2022. I want to thank everybody for a productive meeting, and with that, this meeting is adjourned.